Hi there, welcome. Gonna give a minute or two for people to join. Tonight we're gonna talk about my favorite topic, careers. Got a number of questions, so we're gonna answer those. If you have questions as we're going, please feel free to message, post them, and we'll answer them. Okay, we're gonna give another minute or so for a couple people to join. Feel free to message. This is your chance to put in any career question that you have, a personal question, a general question. It can be something about choosing a career. It can be anything about workplace difficulties, negotiating a raise, deciding if you should leave a job, like anything at all. Okay, so I'll start by just introducing myself, Shaina Keren, and what I do is everything related to career development. My sweet spot is working with people who are mid-career. So maybe you've already done something or you're at a job now, you're doing something and you're just not loving it. You're questioning, maybe I should open a business, maybe there's something that would use more of my talent, something that would give me more satisfaction. So then what I do is that we sit and figure out what are your best talents, what are your aptitudes, and then we put that together with your life goals, what you're looking for, figuring out what that is really. For a lot of people, we have a lot of ideas, but we might not be sure about exactly how that fits into what are my current financial goals, how does that work out with the amount of time that I want to spend with my family. There's so many pieces to a person, and so the goal is to really figure out what is your best life, current life, what are your best skills, and how could we align those things to be able to have your best career at this point in time, and then recognizing that there were maybe something that was better for the past, and there will probably be something that will be better for you in the future, but we really have to work with so many different parts of your life. And so we do aptitude testing, we help people through that, and then I work sometimes with companies who want to make sure that their employees are happy, as each person's strengths being used in their job the right way. Are they, could they be promoted? Is there another part of their job that they would excel at? All those kinds of things. And then of course, my biggest thing that I talk about a lot is making sure that you're getting paid your value. And so whether that's asking for a raise, negotiating when you start a job, making sure that you keep moving up in title so that your career doesn't stay stagnant, because the worst thing is if you just learn how to do a job and then do that for a year, and then, okay, that first year is maybe learning, and then after that doing it on repeat, that's not growing, right? That's just like the same thing again and again. And so the goal is really to keep moving. You might have noticed, and a lot of people have a question about switching jobs. It used to be you were expected to stay at a job for 20 years, 30 years, and that was going to be your job. You went to college for something, you got a degree, you got a job, and then that's where you stayed, and there was loyalty in both directions. Nowadays, people have more of an urge to jump, to move on, and the truth is that a lot of time that does make sense to move on to move companies. Typically, people stay at jobs now 2 to 5 years, which is a lot less than it used to be even 5 years ago. And so one of the biggest reasons to leave a job is if you've maxed out of your current job and there's nowhere to move up. Sometimes you do need to move over. Okay, so I'm going to answer the questions. Feel free to, again, submit your questions and we'll try to answer them. Okay, so the first question that I have here, someone asked, she's 16 years old and she really wants to be a therapist. And she says, I want to do an online program because I don't want to go to college. Which is best? Okay, so a couple of things. Before we even answer her question about should she go to college, where should she go to college for becoming a therapist, if you're 16 years old and you already know what you want to do, congratulations, that's wonderful. You're ahead of lots of people. But before you just go and make a 16-year-old decision for the rest of your life, potentially, I would break that down and first find out. I want to know, and if you're listening now, I want to know what made you decide to be a therapist. Is it because you have a parent who's a therapist? Is it because you yourself are in therapy and you really like it? Do you know someone who's a therapist? Maybe you're really just good with people, you're empathetic, you're the kind of person that your friends always call. when they have, need a listening ear, and people always tell you that you should become a therapist, or maybe, you've just been told that, but I would really want to question why when you're 16, you've made that decision, and to make sure that you're making it for the right reasons. So like that's number one. Don't make a definite decision when you're 16 until you really analyze why you're doing it. And I say this because I get to speak to so many people who've chosen careers because people told them that they would be a great therapist or a great lawyer or a great whatever, but they didn't really ever realize exactly what the job was. They never sat in an office in a day in the life of, or even if they sat in a therapist's office as a patient, they never necessarily got the view of what is it like to do this job from the person who does the job's perspective. And so I really like to make sure that people aren't jumping into all that investment of time and money before they go and invest in a career like that. Okay, so this 16-year-old, right? So if you're, so first of all, we want to find out why, and then see what your reasons are. And just because you're empathetic, and just because you're a really good therapist, and just because you love reading psychology books, are all good reasons, but I don't know if they're good enough reasons. I would want to make sure that you actually would like sitting with patients all day, that you actually enjoy that kind of deep work, maybe that you like doing research, that you understand the paperwork involved, you understand the confidentiality, you understand what a day in the life is actually like. So looking back at this question, okay, so then the question becomes about doing online college versus going to school. But then she says, I don't want to go to college. So I'm confused, honestly, because if you don't want to go to college, then if you think that going to online school is going to be easier, it might be easier not to have to leave your house and the convenience of it. But in a lot of ways, it's harder depending on the program, but there's a lot more self-motivation that you have to, like that you're expected depending on what kind of program it is. But do recognize that if you're going to online college, like again, I want to know why. Is it because you think it's going to be easier? Maybe, maybe not. Why? Are you more introverted? Do you hate having to socialize? Maybe not. Are you very self-motivated? Are you going to be able to do all that work without the social nature of schooling? And so I also wouldn't choose a school based on whether it was online or not. If someone's truly done the research and they've decided, I want to go become a therapist, and then they're choosing the schooling. So I would work backwards. I want to know, okay, what kind of therapist do you see yourself being, and do the research. Do you want to do marriage and family therapy, right? Do you want, what kind of specific therapy are you interested in? And then find out from people in the field. Well, if I have this degree, is that going to get me to that job? Like first deciding where your end game is, and then working backwards is going to answer that question for you. And also knowing why you want to go to online school. Maybe you live in a place where you don't have access to good education, but if you think it's going to be easier and shorter, I would question if it's going to get you the same results. And speak to people who've done the programs and make sure that you're choosing the program that's going to get you to the right first job and give you the right knowledge foundation. Again, college gives you a lot of knowledge, not necessarily practical experience, depending of are they doing a good job with giving you internships and all of that. But the knowledge can't be the only thing that it's giving you. You really want it to be giving you people who, these are the people who you're going to get referrals from. This is going to be your professional network, or at least the start of it. So there is a lot to be said for going to school in person for that kind of career. So I want to know why. Okay, so the next question we have is a very good general question. I think that this will speak to a lot of people. How to know how long to stick to one course of career if you're not seeing success. Okay, so firstly, define success. What does success mean to you? I'm guessing, we can guess a couple of things. So let's guess first that this person is saying that I'm not making enough money and I'm not progressing, right? So let's say they went to school they took a graphic design course or they took a degree in it, and they are not, they got their first job, and maybe it's 2 years in and they haven't moved up, haven't got paid more, haven't been given higher level work, that sort of thing, right? That's what I'm guessing it is if you're like not seeing success. So in that case, I would question if they feel like they themselves are not good at the job, or if there's some thing about where they're working. Like maybe there's just nowhere to move up. Now, people are usually very honest with themselves, and forget like ignoring the whole confidence thing. Well, like, I don't know, I think I'm good, I'm not sure, right? Like, if you're doing a job for any significant amount of time, let's say 2 years, and you see the people around you, you see what their work is, you see how they're progressing, and if you feel like you don't have the right skills, you're missing something, you might be right. Like if you're struggling with a job shouldn't feel hard. It could feel strenuous. It could be stressful at times. You should be using your best skills. You should be using what comes naturally to you. And so it shouldn't feel like you're constantly like pressing and trying to figure out a game that you don't know how to play. If your job feels like that, I would really question if you have the natural skills, if you chose the career or how you chose the career, and if you chose it correctly. So say that graphic designer in that example, I've worked with a number of people like this who took a test. We said, okay, you know what? Maybe that wasn't for you. So let's take a test and see what your best skills are. And then we did aptitude testing. Now, aptitude testing, do not confuse it with personality testing, with behavioral testing, with strengths testing. There are lots of great tests that you can get online for free or for really cheap. And those tests are usually tests that are multiple choice tests, and by whatever you input, so putting in a bunch of information, it's going to ask you, do you prefer to spend time, to spend an evening at home or out with friends? Do you prefer the country or the city? Things like that. So depending on your mood that day, depending on, what you feel like is like the right answer for you, you'll put it in, and it's only going to spit out the answer it's going to give you is only going to be as good as the questions and as good as what you chose. But if it's multiple choice questions, and say you took it different days, you put in different responses, so then you really should have been an engineer versus an astronaut, right? So those tests are really just based on what you put into it, and you sort of, what they're trying to get at. So it's a little bit hard to do it accurately. So a proper aptitude test should be like a test in school where it's testing your natural abilities. So say you're trying out for, not even like a test in school, say you're trying out for something like sports, or you're trying out for a part in a play. So you're going to have the natural talent or you're not. There's no way to prepare for it much. Obviously, you can do your preparation, but the person who's going to get the lead role or the lead position, they have some natural talent, and that's apparent. So a real aptitude test, it's testing your cognitive abilities. So in this back to that example with the graphic designer, so we did testing, and then the test that was like the spatial, where we tested how a person visualizes, if they have the ability to visualize in 3D or not. This person had that really low. They were much better at conceptual thinking, but not really good at 3-dimensional thinking. So if someone's in a career and they're not progressing, very often we can find the answer in an aptitude test where we get scores in a bunch of different areas that relate to careers, and then one of their scores is such a complete mismatch with their job. Like that's generally the reason. If someone has burnout, typically we can attribute that to one of a couple of things, and it's so obvious once we see, okay, here's your best skill. Like, come in and don't even tell me what your job is, and take a test, and then we'll say, well, these are your best skills, and these are these are things that you the things that you don't want to focus on, that don't use your strengths, and here's the things that do use your strengths. And it's usually really obvious if someone is not enjoying their job, what those things are, and then how that fits. So if you're at a job and you feel like you've put in the effort, you've done the trainings, you've practiced, you've tried your best, you've seen the people around you, and somehow they're all doing a better job than you, it seems to come more naturally to them, more easy. It's probably because it does. It's probably because they have those natural skills. And then don't stick it out just because you committed to something, right? Like if you made a wrong turn when you were driving, you wouldn't keep going in the wrong direction just because you already did it. So it's like a waste of time to turn around. Like, no, the sooner you back up, the less time you're going to lose. And so, don't worry, which is hard to do, but what the people around you will say. It's so much better to just say, like, I obviously don't have the best skills for that. Now, I believe, doing what I do, career coaching, consulting, that every single person has natural talents, and there's a job, and not just one job for every person, but everyone has a job that they could do that comes naturally to them, that uses your best skills. The things that are fun for you to do, like the goal is to turn that into a job and to use your best skills so that, yeah, like I said before, it could be stressful at times, it could be hard, but it shouldn't feel like you're working against your nature and like everyone else around you it's coming easy to them, and for some reason like you just feel like always like you can't figure it out, or like there was like some secret manual that everyone else had access to and you don't. So that's like one situation that where people just feel like, if you feel like you're in the wrong course, like change direction. Now, another thing that I see very common is that a young person will go to school for something, they'll choose like a college degree just because, right? Because people don't often take the right kinds of like testing, and they just have a lot of pressure, right? You're this age, you're graduating, maybe you have a gap year, and then that's it. Like you're supposed to start your degree, you're supposed to start whatever it is that you're doing. So they'll invest a lot of time and money into a program, but they didn't necessarily do the right research. So it's like, okay, like myself, for example, right? I'm gonna go get a master's in special education because I like kids, I like teaching. Like those things don't necessarily mean that they should influence my career, but right. So making a decision like that, a lot of people will just go into it. Now, if you went to school for something where the classes are not easy for you, you're struggling more than the people around you, you feel like you're not enjoying the subjects. Now, not to say that schooling and everything you learn in school is going to be exactly like the job. It won't. But if you don't like any of the subjects that you're learning about, and you're not understanding it, so say you're learning about education and childhood development and psychology and parenting and all those things, and none of those things resonate with you, that's a really good clue that you're probably not going to love the career if you hate the schooling. Not across the board, but generally engineers enjoy engineering courses. People who become scientists or architects, enjoy geometry and those kinds of things. So if you don't like it and you just can't stand the schooling for it, like that's a clue. Back up right then. Go to your college advisor, speak to them, and see if you can take testing and how you could transfer those credits if that's the situation. Now, if someone's later on in their career, so say maybe you love something in the beginning, you did it for a good decade, maybe you're an amazing teacher, you're an amazing designer, whatever it is that you did, and it was great for them, but right now you're feeling burnt out, you're not waking up excited to go to work anymore, you're not being maybe as nice as you used to your clients or your coworkers. So that's like another thing. So back to this question, to stick to this course of career, like it could have worked for your younger self and it's not working for you now, and that's okay. That's completely fine. You should develop. We expect you not to be the same person at 30 than you were at 20, and at 40 the same thing. And so the goal is for your career to evolve, hopefully not go around in circles, but sort of spiral up. So you might be doing similar things in another capacity. Recognize that about 80% of skills are transferable. So even though you think that what you're doing in your job now is so specific and you can never transfer it, I would challenge you that probably a lot of what you're doing, you can use in another field, and it's not as hard as you think to change things around. People care less about degrees than they used to. It's more about proving what you can do. And so if you're in that situation where you're changing your career and trying to switch to something else, it takes guts, it takes belief in yourself. It takes not being afraid of what people will say, that you're jumping around. And maybe for other people, it's even a bigger jump, like opening a business or something. But if you used to succeed and you're not succeeding anymore, that's fine. People evolve, careers evolve, they should. That's super healthy. Okay, the next question we have is great. Is there a formula or system one can apply to figure out their career choice? Absolutely, there is. So how do we choose a career? Okay, so like some basics, right? Personality typing. I'm guessing if you follow OK Clarity, you're probably the kind of person who more than once or at least once tried to take a Google how to figure out my personality. Maybe your Myers-Briggs type, like INFP, ESTJ. Like there's like 4 letters. If you don't know your type, please go take a personality quiz. You're gonna love it. It's gonna tell you things about yourself that you're not gonna believe like someone can know about you without having ever met you. So you can go to my website at shainakeren.com. There's a simple quiz there, a free quiz that you can take, and you'll get like a full personality analysis. And it's not just careers. It has to do with like relationships and how you are in your personal life. And it's super insightful for any, like a variety of things in your life. So that's like one thing. So first of all, know your personality type. Now, just because you know your personality type doesn't mean that you know what your skills are. So just because, for example, I'll do just like a short summary of personality types. So there's 4 categories of personality. So we have, the first one is extrovert and introvert, and it's sort of where are you on the continuum, right? So more extroverted get more energy from like external, outside of themselves. More introverted get more of the recharge internally. Again, different seasons of life. Like, so if you're an introvert, but you're a very social person, you could be what we call an introverted tribal, so that you like having people around you, being part of a team, but not necessarily having to talk to them all the time. But maybe at a point in your life, if you're living alone, for example, you might want your job to be more social. But then if there's a time in your life, maybe you have young kids and you live in a neighborhood where you get to see a lot of people outside. So at that point, we would want to dial down the introverted. So we want our job always to match like that part of our personality type. And then the same for the other 3 parts. If you don't know your personality, go find it out and then learn what parts of yourself you need to match at work. Very often there will be a clue there if you're not enjoying work right now as to what would make it better. One point about personality type, the third part is feeling and thinking. So that's like how you make decisions. So there are people, half of us are feelers. So when we make a decision, we go straight to how we feel about it. And the other half of us are thinkers. So we go straight to like logic, pros and cons when we're making a decision. If you're at a job, like just a common reason for burnout I want to throw out there, if you're at a job where you're not getting appreciation or you don't feel like you're helping anyone and you're a feeler, like generally the way you buy a pair of shoes is by like, oh, I love it. Okay, let's check the price. Like that kind of person. The shoe example might not work for you, but in general. So you're the kind of person also that needs to be appreciated at work, and you need to hear thank you. You're doing an amazing job, or you need to know that you're making a difference to people, like your customers, your clients every day. And if you're not, that's an easy way to lead to burnout. So there's so many clues in personality type that can help you understand what kind of job to choose, and if you're not happy at a job, what kind of job would be right. Okay, so we know your personality, but just because we know that you're introverted and you're intuitive and you're a feeler and you're a perceiver, you like things open-ended, still doesn't tell us what kind of career you would like, because that's missing the whole cognitive piece. So think about the people like the right brain, left brain, right? So like, are you better at like the math? Are you better at like literature, history, right? Like, so which parts do you like? Think about things. So that's one point. Like just like sort of your interest, I would call it. Someone's asking about a good book on this topic. So if you really want to do it right and you want like a good book that's not necessarily easy reading, but you will figure yourself out, like everything you need to know, I highly recommend The Pathfinder by Nicholas Lohr, a mentor of mine. That's actually how I became a career coach, career consultant. I trained with Nicholas Lohr. He's like the original, he came up with the term career coach in the 1980s when there was no such thing. The only coaches were like sports coaches. And so he came up with this term, like there has to be someone who does this. And so he wrote like the guidebook. There are a lot of other books. I'm always checking them out to see if anything better came up. There are not so many great ones that I have to recommend. Carrie Twigg wrote a good book called The Career Stories Method. If you're more of like the type of person who enjoys like introspective, meditative, that kind of thinking. So that's more like going inside of yourself, thinking in a very deep way. That's another one that I recommend. So the next thing that we're looking at is like the aptitudes, right? So we mentioned like spatial, so that's one of them. Another one that people test for that's really insightful is a test that we call low idea flow. So there are people who have very high rate of idea flow. If you suspect that or do have ADD, ADHD, that might feel like you, like the kind of people who are just like always jumping from thing to thing and racing, and their brain's always coming up with something, and they get really bored of repetitive work. So that's something that we test for, and it's a very common reason for burnout. It's not very common to have a high rate of idea flow, but for those who do, they're most likely not going to be in jobs that match their rate of idea flow, like the pace that they like to work at. And so that's a very easy cause for burnout. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have the same thing where people who have a lower rate of idea flow, people who like to have intense, deep focus on one thing at a time, and can get really absorbed in something. And it's not like one is smarter than the other. It's different modes of working. And so if you're at a job that expects you to, have a faster output pace and just coming up with information really quickly, then you're not going to like the job, and that's going to be burnout on the other end. So these are all things that people should know about themselves. The spatial one that I mentioned is, again, it's about like 3-dimensional thinking. So, if you ever put together like a bookcase or something, so people who are, so think about how you put it together. So you open up the box, like from IKEA, you throw it on the floor, and then the people who are spatial, they sort of see it, and they see all the pieces, and they have a picture. They can look at it and say like, oh, okay, that's how it's going to go together. I see it. That's going to be the front, that's the back. As they're building it, they might follow the instructions, but they have a vision how it's going to look. People who are non-spatial, sorry, got interrupted there. People who are non-spatial, they look at it, they follow the instructions, and then it's built. It's like, oh, that's cool. Like, I did not see that coming, right? So whether or not you have that kind of 3-dimensional thinking, that's a really important thing to know. I've seen people go into careers like dentistry that were non-spatial. Guess what? They failed. It didn't work. If you can't think visually like that, you're not going to be able to imagine how each tooth needs to look or be fixed, and things like that. So aptitude testing, we also want to test things like your problem-solving skills. There are people who are better at problem solving when give me the information and then I'll figure out what to do with it. And there are people who are better at like, tell me the problem and then I'll figure out a solution, like the more creative, right? Like coming from more cerebral or much more like hands-on. Those are all things that we want to know about a person to be able to choose a career. So to summarize the answer to that question, how is there a way to figure out a career path? So A, know your personality type. Go on my website, find your personality type profile, figure it out, Google everything that you could on the subject. You'll get so many good suggestions. But don't just stop there. Don't just take those suggestions, because those are only based on your personality, not based on your cognitive skills. So we want to know, are you spatial? What's your rate of idea flow? What's your problem solving skills? Do you have good attention to detail? Like good visual dexterity? Are you creative, right? Like you can choose a job based on those things, but then depending if you have high creativity, like thinking of new ideas quickly, that's going to make a big difference. Someone's asking my website. It's ShainaKeren.com, ShainaKeren.com. So just type in my name, you'll find it there. You can message me on LinkedIn. There's a place you can book a call there. Okay, let's see what other questions we have. Okay, no, that's the bulk of the questions. Okay, I see we only have 3 minutes left. So I'll mention just something of like tying this into therapy. I noticed recently, very, very interestingly enough, that not most, but I would say a very significant percentage of my referrals were coming from therapists. And then when I thought about it, I noticed another thing, that my clients didn't used to necessarily talk about therapy, but nowadays, I don't know if it's because more of my clients are in therapy or it's become more acceptable. I would say a combination. But so many people who, most of my clients will mention their therapist, not across the board, but lots of people. And so to me, what that means is, and the way I've sort of explained it to myself, is that I believe that people who are into personal development and into making themselves better, automatically they're going to want to make their careers better, because your career can only be as great as you are, right? Like if you don't have highly developed emotional intelligence, if you have, trauma that you're dealing with, or whatever it is that's going on in your life that's unresolved, or other issues, relationship issues, your career is not going to be the first thing, right? And it's sort of just going to plod around and just a job that you go to. But when everything else in your life is working out well, then your career generally is something that you could focus on, and then it could progress. And then the more developed you are and the more worked on you are as a person, I see that personally. I see that with clients. It matches so closely, your personal development. And so this is a funny thing to say in general, but I think this might be the right place to say it, that the more you invest in your mental health, your career is going to grow up like so closely. It's incredible to watch that personal investment and how it matches the amount of money you're going to make, the titles you'll have, the opportunities you'll have, the promotions you'll get, and all of that. Okay, so I see we're exactly at 8:30. So if there are any questions, feel free to message me. LinkedIn is where I usually hang out. You can go to Shaina Keren on Instagram. I'll try to take a look over the next 2 days, have that checked out. If anybody who has a question, you can schedule a free call on my website, shainakeren.com. Thank you all so much for joining, and have a good night.